If you're a mortgage broker, you want to self-direct your retirement account, go make loans in this world, you can. You as a real estate broker, you think you've got more knowledge of an investment in real estate than somebody else? Do you think you've got the ability to do something with it? I would hope so. You can use that to make a difference, all right? Value-added stuff. All those things are fine. You can take a look at these assets. What do you have? What do you want? How are you going to make it work? I was always taught to answer 3 questions. What am I going to make? How am I going to make it? When am I going to make it? If I can't answer those questions, don't buy the thing. When we look at retirement accounts, the other thing, I've got a couple of accommodator friends in the room, and the funny thing about 1031s is, I've been doing this since, for almost 30 years now. And you look at a 1031, how often do we even see our client in that situation? We'll get a call, all of a sudden money rolls in the door, and they don't know you, they don't care. It's just really a strange thing to me. Retirement clients come in the office every single day. And I ask them, what's the difference? They say, well, this is my retirement. I go, well, what's the rest of your money? You'd think it would be looked at differently, but people are more conservative in this space. And when we look at loans, those things are out there, but it's going to be a lower loan to value. Other things are out there. We're going to talk about what's going on. We've got Gary Schnell over here with Lawstein. He does a lot of our legal a lot of legal work in our world, and both in 1031 side and the IRA 401k stuff. Anita, and she's going to represent something called a solo 401k, what she's done with it, a CCIM. We've got Mr. Nelson here, CCIM and CRE. He's got what we would call a basic self-directed IRA. Brent McLean's going to come up also and represent what we call a checkbook IRA. These are all different vehicles. I'll throw one other vehicle on there, something called a rollover business startup. So if we look at those first 3, they're investment vehicles. We look at the rollover business startup, we can literally create a new business using the retirement account. If Darcy was here, Darcy Norby from Banner, Power Partner, where is she? She should be here. We did a rollover business startup for her a few years ago to buy real estate, to make real estate investments. You're going to flip property, you want to work on stuff, you've got to have a rollover business startup. The acronym's sort of unfortunate, it robs. But we'll get into this thing right now, and we've got, everybody's going to go through their examples, what they've done. I'm going to establish base knowledge real quickly right now. You're probably going to get out here, boy, he talked fast. But we've got a lot of information to get through in a short period of time. And if you've got questions, we're going to be around at the end to answer those questions. So what's a self-directed IRA? And I don't know how many of you remember, we had a gentleman named Pat Rice. He owned a company called Orlock Investments. He wrote a book on IRA investing probably 20 years ago. He actually spoke at the CCIM meeting. And what the funny thing to me was he pitched IRAs as sort of an alternative 1031. It's not. There's situations where even with a Roth IRA, you have to do an exchange. So we will talk about those situations. But if you're looking at IRAs, 401ks, that's qualified money. We're looking at 1031s, that's tax money, 2 different things. We can actually combine those 2 into a common investment. That's fine. In that situation, you're going to need tenancy in common on acquisition just because of the 1031 rules. But we can have joint ownership of these things. But if you look at self-directed IRA, it's not a legally defined term. It's just a term that describes an account that allows you to do what you want to do. And if I asked the room right now, I said, okay, who in the room's got a self-directed IRA? Half dozen hands will go up. And then I'm going to ask, well, who's it with? And if you say one of the, Wells Fargo, for example, it's what they define as a self-directed IRA. It's going to allow you the ability to buy something off their menu of investments. When we talk about a self-directed IRA or solo 401k, it's a plan or an account that literally allows you to make any investment the law allows. 2 totally different things. So I would call it a truly self-directed IRA or truly self-directed 401k, not one of the others, all right? So if we look at a basic IRA, it's simple. And I used to sit in a seminar all day long, walk out, and all I'd know is how to buy the investment they were trying to sell me. I wouldn't understand how to do this. An IRA, all you're doing is shifting that money from a custodian that won't allow you to do what you want to one that does. If we're looking at a 401k plan, typically what we do, we're going to talk, Gary and I are going to have a conversation. We're going to review a plan, see if your plan allows you to go do what you want to do. If it doesn't, can we amend the plan to allow it to do what we want it to do? If we can't amend it, we'll replace it. But really, we're just looking at a restriction that's not by law, it's by that plan. So, how do you create a self-directed IRA? Move from custodian A to custodian B. Who in the room can't do that? It's pretty easy, right? Not confusing, not complicated. Wrong direction. New clicker for me. What are the common objections? I always laugh at this. I went to a big Tennessee and Common Company's presentation probably 6 months ago. They had an economist speaking, they had a CPA speak, and then they had one of their investment sponsors speak on this stuff. And I walked up, they talked about 1031 some, they talked about IRA investing some, and I went up, talked to the CPA afterwards, and I said, nice job on the thing out there. He asked what I did, and I told him. He says, well, I still don't think it's a good idea to go buy real estate with somebody's IRA. I said, oh, really? Why not? Well, number one comment is, well, you lose long-term capital gains tax treatment. Can you name an investment you make with a retirement plan that gives you that? It says a pointless statement. Cannot be leveraged. Totally untrue. Got to be non-recourse debt. It's not that easy to find, but if you type in myiralender.com or iralending.com, it's there. Kevin Geraci, is Kevin here? Opus Bank, they'll do this stuff, okay? It's there. Lose interest deductions, depreciation. Gary, you have any comments on that point of it? I get to stick them on the spot. If it's leverage, we may have some, but typically you're not going to have it, right?
Not in an IRA.
Is it on?
I think it's on. Not in an IRA, but we'll talk about later maybe. You'll have a LLC possibly.
So there are situations where it might be there, but typically you're not going to have it. But once again, if we look at anything you buy with a retirement account, does it give you those things? Do you have the ability to use those?
No.
No. Okay. How about required minimum distributions, Gary? Do we have a way around that?
With like the LLC structure, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, in kind. How about the perfect end game?
Yeah, we could. If your assets in a LLC and it's time to make distributions, you could. I really don't like this. You could basically just either tick out part of the asset, or if you want, you could distribute the LLC interest, whatever the numbers, whatever you calculate would be required for your distribution. You could basically distribute the LLC interest and possibly get a discount. So you'd use basic appraisal rules to determine what kind of a minority discount, lack of marketability discount you might have. And then from there, you'd be able to essentially reduce the amount of the distribution, but you'd have more of the asset as you get it. So there's some nuances, but that's about it.
So you give Gary some work on this. The bottom line is that last objection, that they treat it as a real problem. The issue that comes up is, okay, you got to take that. So at 59.5, you can start taking money out. At 70.5, you have to. And the problem is, what happens if you got a dark building? Somebody was asking earlier. You've got a situation where you buy this property, you buy this asset. You've got to have money in the plan. If you've got leveraged investment to cover it, it's not your property. And I guess that's one thing I want to say. We're not taking money out of a plan or out of an IRA to do these investments. We're just changing the custodian, or we're changing the plan to one that allows these things. So, no problems pulling money out to do this stuff. We're just looking at a situation where we're changing things to allow you to do these things. And what, if you look at the situation, Mr. Nelson came to me a few years ago talking about a Roth conversion. He said, and I hope you don't mind me telling the story real quickly. So if you haven't noticed, Renee's a little younger than he is, but no, he's going to shake his head. She's much better looking and much more well-behaved too, but we won't get into that anymore. But the thing is, Bob wanted to take care of her, so he was talking about converting the asset into a Roth. And the idea is, what's the difference between traditional to Roth? Traditional is pre-tax money growing tax deferred. Problem is, you're going to pay normal income tax on distributions. The Roth is tax money growing tax free. So Bob's idea was, hey, look, I'm going to sit there, and this is a problem with what Gary said, not with what he said, but the structure on an in-kind distribution, it solves that problem where you're not going to have a problem getting that distribution. So an in-kind distribution is a great solution. The downside is you're not receiving the cash to pay the tax obligation. Typically, you're going to take a cash distribution. I think that's what typically the service considers, and you're just going to peel off a piece of that to the tax, right? In kind, you're taking this distribution in kind. You don't have the cash to pay it, but we've worked with Gary where we'll take, and a couple years ago we had a broker that had a I think it was a mini storage property up in Idaho. And he loved the property, but he was tired of the non-recourse money. That money's more expensive. And he said, look, I love this property. He had just hit 70 and a half, I guess. And he just said, look, I'd like to pull this thing out. I'd like to refi it using regular money. So what we did, Gary talked to him, structured the deal, took a portion of minority interest on the first distribution in the fall, able to be discounted, as Gary just explained. The second distribution was taken pre-tax obligation the next year. And how did he pay that? Cash out refinance, which he put permanent financing in place as soon as he took full distribution of the asset. If we use an IRA or a 401k and we use an LLC, we're just doing an assignment of membership interest. It can also be used as tenancy in common, and you can also jointly own things either way. So we'll talk about that in a few minutes too. But don't look at these things and think, hey, we got a problem. Mr. Nelson's situation was, hey, I want to do this Roth conversion, take care of my wife, and I don't want to come out of pocket. So once again, after he took that conversion, he went and did the cash out refi. He was going to do this to pay the tax obligation on the Roth conversion. But I think it was a great solution, great idea. What'd I do? All right. Gary, you want to talk about possible investments with an IRA?
You can basically invest in anything except for collectibles, life insurance contracts, and not in the Section 408, but in the S-Corp rules, IRAs cannot own, they're not a person that can own S-Corp stock. So collectibles, again, for Rob's plans.
They need to hear a little louder.
Closer?
Yes, there you got it.
Like this? I mean, this is ridiculous. Okay. All right. You told me this, didn't you?
She did. She tried. She takes good care of us. Don't you back there, Karen?
So so basically, it's anything other than collectibles, which stamps, certain coins. So you can treasury coins. You can have gold. We've done gold many times. Yeah, gold. And so they do cars, but you're not supposed to. and other stuff. So, but mostly we're here for real estate, so, or LLC interests.
I'm going to learn this clicker before I'm done here. So what kind of property can we buy, Gary?
Really any property. So whatever, you can buy a tick interest. You could buy the whole bundle of sticks. So retail, apartment buildings, land, bare land. You can, with good consideration, you could buy a developed land that you're going to develop. So we've done that many times where we've, for developers basically, or people that wanted to be a developer would buy property, we'd kick it into an LLC, and then we'd set about to either add investors or add different other entities to assist with the development.
So we have some Ben brokers in here today. I know we've got at least one, a few of them, right? So what happened with the dirt prices during the crash? Got dirt cheap, didn't it? So what we ended up doing for several developers over there, they said, look, I want to buy this land. I just don't know when I'm going to be able to build on it. So what we did in a couple situations is we created a checkbook IRA for them to land bank, sit on the property until they were going to build on it. The problem is, as Gary was just saying, the problem with that structure, we've got that retirement account, that gentleman's retirement account owning the asset, and then later he wants to build on it, which would constitute a prohibited transaction. So we created a second limited liability company, crushed the developer's interest in that. Maybe we put the other vendors into it too, the plumbers, the electricians, everyone else. And now we got that builder developer down to a membership interest in the second LLC, where it no longer constituted a prohibited transaction between disqualified parties. And that really works well. So we're always looking at a situation where, in the 1031 world, I like simple. So I always look at four basic things. It's got to be an exchange. What's getting received got to be like kind. We have to satisfy what we call the napkin test, a cross or up in value and equity. We have to have continuity of vesting. When I look at a retirement account, I've got two issues. What's a person want to buy? And who are they going to transact between or for the benefit of? It's simple. And you just look at those two things. And when you understand the laws and what you can and can't do, and the way the law works in this stuff, Gary taught me, is like, look, if it's not prohibited, it's therefore allowed. Real estate investments not prohibited, therefore it's allowed. And what's interesting is when we're looking at these different transactions, you can't transact between or for the benefit of disqualified party, but you can transact along.
Yeah, I mean, so the case law basically established pretty much right away that set fire to the kind of the self-directed IRA world was Swanson case, which basically said if you simultaneously form an IRA, form an LLC that has your IRA and your own personal funds, you can basically the LLC is not disqualified at the time. So the primary, and we're not supposed to get into too much code sections, but kind of the umbrella for all of self-directed IRAs is this code section 4975, which essentially determines whether or not there's been a prohibited transaction that's taken place. And so kind of most of the planning involved deals with, kind of how to make sure the transaction complies with that code section. And so I wanted to add to David's comment about, developers and stuff. So frequently we'll use notes to kind of assist a developer. So the developer's got some IRA money, and they have some of their own money, and perhaps they want to contribute more, so they need more money to finish the project. We'll use notes as part of the subscription obligation, and so they'll kind of even up what the IRA is going to contribute and what the participant can later contribute, so that we meet that simultaneous rule. And then as long as there's notes being paid, so I've tested this on audit, unfortunately, and they'll as long as there's payments being made, the service will honor that note.
So we've actually, Gary's worked on some projects to us where we had a 1031 client come in. The disposition property had both qualified money and taxed money coming in. So the initial acquisition, it was tenancy in common, the initial acquisition wasn't large enough that the qualified money wanted to be an owner of this asset too. But it was going to be an improvement exchange creating a very, very large project. I think the earthquake, that was like $2.5 million, $1.5 million worth of retrofitting for that component alone, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
in Portland.
Yeah. So we had a large project going on. The qualified investors wanted to be in there. So what we did is we peeled them out of the transaction. We used them as debt on the acquisition, took care of the 1031 component. The qualified money came in, was used for improvements, and then what do you do with the note in that situation, Gary?
Well, the note was a convertible note, so essentially there was an option to convert essentially on a certain event. So either a contribution of the TIC interest to an LLC or some other exit, and so we kind of protected the profitability for the plan, along with allowing us to satisfy the 1031 rules.
See, isn't this fun? All kinds of great solutions. See, I just got to get this stupid clicker going the right way. I'll get there. So we've got 3 different ways to do this, okay? 3 different ways, 3 different methods. We've got people representing each of these. A basic self-directed IRA, like I said, we're going to just move money from custodian. It won't allow you to do what you want to one that does. That's all we're doing. The issue for you, if you're on the brokerage side, is this. Who are you writing the offer between? So you're going to make that purchase. Who are you going to write the offer between? And technically, the owner of the asset is going to be the trust company for benefit of your client's IRA. And so as far as earnest money and as far as anything else, Gary, you want to make any comments as far as when this thing should be taken care of? And understand the account takes 2 to 4 weeks to get created and get ready, and then you're going to have to submit things. So,
I mean, if you have the notion that you want to do this, the best time is before you start looking for properties. So right away.
So you as a broker, if somebody comes to you, you want to know 2 things. 1, is the account established? 2, what type of account is it? If it's a basic self-directed IRA, you're going to have to be very, very patient. On the other hand, if we've got a checkbook IRA, and Gary, you want to talk about this structure, a checkbook IRA you're going to love because you're simply writing an offer between the seller and a limited liability company that has a trust company as its member or as a member.
Well, the checkbook IRA I guess labeling came about with basically because you're taking your IRA fund. So you have an IRA account, and then essentially you're having that account own or invest in all of the ownership interests in an LLC. So basically, you direct your custodian to acquire 100% of the ownership interests in an LLC, and then essentially you're the manager. So you're able to do administrative tasks for your traditionally invested IRA. So the same thing really applies for management of an LLC. You know, you're able to write checks and sign purchase agreements and do the kind of the normal things that you would do, and pick the assets. Basically, that's they call it a checkbook IRA because you have the checkbook, so you don't need to go to the custodian. So a normal IRA with, let's say, IRA Services or Pensco, you have to find the asset and you have to have the custodian do all the paperwork and sign everything. So it can take time to do that, and you also have to continually go back to them and get their permission, oversight into things, which may be a good thing. But with an IRA that's invested in an LLC, the LLC can do pretty much everything that it wants to do.
So Gary's comment, maybe that's a good thing. If you've got a basic account, you do have a safety net. The custodian's there to hopefully keep you out of some trouble. If you've got a Wall Street IRA, I mean, you can make a horrible investment, but you're not going to blow up the thing. You're not going to create what would be considered a prohibited transaction. A basic self-directed IRA, you know, I would love to tell you that those custodians are going to protect you all around. I don't see that happen. They do a lot of things that I would sort of look at and we don't want to see happen. But
They don't do a lot of investigation.
Yeah. So they're going to have things happen. I did a presentation up in Seattle a few years ago, and somebody came up during a break. So I love my self-directed IRA. I said, really, what do you have, or what do you do with it? She said, well, I do flippers. I said, oh, you must have a checkbook IRA. She says, no, I've got a basic account. I said, well, how do you pay the vendors? How do you pay the plumber? How do you pay whomever? I just write them checks. So every time she wrote a check, what was she doing? She was making really an illegal contribution. And she'd been doing it for years. So, that's not the right thing to do. We try to keep people on the rails, and so we do reviews every year with our people. They fill out a questionnaire. If we see something funny, Gary sees something funny, we're going to go back to them. We're going to have them talk to their tax people and hopefully get it fixed before there's a problem. But
they never fill out the questionnaire all the way.
Yeah, they never do. But I mean, a common issue, like with a checkbook IRA, for example, is they want to make a contribution or a distribution. What happens is they'll go straight into the LLC or straight from the LLC to them, which is a prohibited transaction, which, by the way, with an IRA does what, Gary? Blows up the entire IRA.
It basically disqualifies the IRA, and so you're going to pay tax based on the value at the beginning of the year, the calendar year.
That's one of those things where Anita's going to talk about solo 401ks, totally different thing. Only the money involved with the indiscretion is treated as a distribution with a 401k versus the IRA. But you got to be careful. So, the idea is if you're working as a broker in this situation, understand one, whether it's ready to go, two, what type of account it is, and that's going to dictate how you're going to write the offer. Whether it's a basic, a checkbook IRA, or solo 401k, it's all going to be different. All right, and you've got to be careful, make sure you're doing the right thing. One other comment, you see that bubble, the new IRA LLC, that bubble could contain multiple accounts. It could contain traditional and Roth money, it could contain a husband and wife's respective IRAs, it could contain their IRAs and personal money too. That investment that is made by the custodian and the accounts is in that LLC, which then makes all future investments. So we've got to be careful. If the LLC contains disqualified members, we can have the initial funding is fine, but after that we can't have additional money going in. So once again, if you've got a big commercial building, the thing goes dark, if it's a single tenant building, you better have the reserves in that bubble to cover any shortfall there. Otherwise you're going to have a problem. So plan ahead. And my experience, once again, with the people coming into the office, they are more conservative in this space. They don't want to have a problem, okay? So, solo 401k, you've got a 401k plan. Somebody comes to us with it. It's really interesting. I've got a client. He's a CPA, he's a real estate broker. He's an ex-IRS auditor. And he came to me one day and said, look, I want to buy into one of our local companies has this Tennessee in Common value add project they were doing, and he wanted to buy into it. Really in that situation, he was just making an investment in an LLC interest in this asset. So I said, well, let me take a look at your plan and see if it allows it. Guess what? After his administrator told him it did, and it did, he was able to do it. So what was funny to me is I ended up arguing with the guy about it. I said, look, I can do this, but this investment needs to happen. It's in his best interest, your best interest, if we just have this investment work. And I literally had to look at the plan, look at the paragraph and the sentence on it, show it to him, and then finally he took it to his legal counsel. I said, look, it's easy for me to take him, but it's in his best interest to go forward with you guys. Said, okay, we'll do it, but it's going to take 60 days. I said, well, that's not going to work. So he ended up changing it. So we ended up replacing it with a new plan that allowed it. But a lot of times you'll be surprised. I mean, Gary spends a lot of time working on these things. We had a client in Boise, a broker that we do a lot of work with. He's active with a mart. He called up. He had sold a property. This pharmacist had bought the note from him. So this note sitting there actually wanted to buy the note. So when he sold the property on 1031, he had to be isolated from actual or constructive receipt of the note. The note was sitting with the accommodator, and this pharmacist friend wanted to buy the note. So what we did, took a look at his plan. In that situation, found out, yes, once again, it did allow it. So his administrator was kind enough, said, yeah, we'll do this. So they posted the investment in the coffee room at the business, so everybody had the opportunity to do it for the reasonable period of time, and then they end up getting the deal done, which allowed the broker to complete the 1031. So, think about that. You do a seller carryback in an exchange, what are you going to do with the paper? Maybe somebody's retirement account can buy that. Maybe they like that note. So that's an opportunity for you. Solo 401ks, just think of it this way. We're just creating a new plan that allows you to buy anything the law allows. Gary, I don't know if you want to make any comments. In the legal community, there's some concern maybe if you provide a plan for a business that has employees, that there's more liability for you as a business owner. So you have to sort of look at what you're doing. But for an individual broker, you guys are self-employed. So if somebody comes to me on that situation, we're going to look at that 401k plan. We can't move Roth money or beneficiary IRAs into them. But if you look at these things, why do I like these? You've got, mid $50,000 range annual contributions. You can do in-plan conversions to Roth. No U-bit on leverage. So that's one thing I want to mention. Gary, we're talking about some of these other deductions normally you wouldn't take. If you leverage an IRA, even with a Roth IRA, you're going to have tax on the income or gain that's attributable to anybody else's money, whether it's a seller carryback, a lender, anything you generate due to other people's money, you've got tax exposure on. With a 401k plan, I guess some senator had one, so you don't. So Anita's sitting here smiling because that's what she's got, all right? You don't have to have the custodian. You can buy literally anything other than collectibles. You can borrow against them, half what's in them, to a max of $50,000. The only reporting you got is a $5,500 easy. And, the cost is set up, and then the annual amendments or restatements every 5 to 7 years. But they work great. Where to go? Gary, joint ownership. So if we talk about taking something, remember we talked about the in-kind distributions, and we said you can either, if it's owned by an LLC, it's one thing, so would you like to make any comments on this?
Well, I mean, the joint ownership, typically, you'll have somebody who is interested in a piece of property. They've got some of the money, but they figure out they don't have all the money to buy it. So it's not uncommon at all to have them to come to David and basically say, hey, I want to use my IRA funds to help acquire. How do I do that? So the process is similar to the checkbook IRA. Basically, you have the owner, the participant come in together simultaneously to the IRA funds. They're nearly simultaneous. Like I said before, you can assist with a note, but you can also, like the slide before had, you could bring in all sorts of other people. And so it's not uncommon to see in private placements, IRAs and other pension funds come in as a subscriber to a much larger, like a hotel project. And so this is very similar to that. You basically have your IRA come in with you, your spouse, your brother, your parents, your children, grandchildren, neighbor, who else?
No,
Your friend.
that's it. Other entities. So the bottom line is, like I said earlier, prohibited transaction would be, considered a problem if you're transacting between or for the benefit of a disqualified party, but you can always transact along with. So we look at situations where you want to have joint ownership. For my accommodator friends in the audience, we know partnership interests are specifically prohibited from exchange. So if we want to combine personal money and plan money into an acquisition, it's going to have to be tenancy in common. If we are looking at distributions, there's always ups and downs. Do you want to have a tenancy in common, or do you want to take a membership interest? Membership interest is easy because we're just assigning that membership interest. Title doesn't change. But if you've got joint ownership between that qualified and tax money upon a sale, and you don't want to pay the tax personally, you're going to want to do an exchange. So we might use that tenancy in common structure. If you're going to use a tenancy in common structure, you better use somebody that understands what needs to be in that TIC agreement to take care of the retirement accounts. So, we do these things all the time, and I always make sure, hey, I'm going to send Gary. Gary's going to create a TIC agreement that's going to keep them once again on the tracks, keep them safe, keep them going where they need to go. But I think that's one of those things where people, they don't understand those in-kind distributions. They don't understand that you can jointly own stuff. It's just you've got to be careful with it. And I've got, Dale here, he's talking about the tax on leverage. It is important that when you're working on these transactions, if you do this, you need more so than ever. I think anybody in investment real estate needs to have good tax counsel. I mean, it's very, very important. When we're looking at these things, it's even more complicated, and there's even fewer people. We look at 1031, it's been around since the 20s. We look at this stuff, it's been around since the mid-70s. There's so little case law out there. You're either going to pay somebody to learn on your behalf, or you're going to pay somebody that knows. And my advice is pay somebody that knows, all right? So I mentioned this one earlier. This is a great deal because these people came into us and basically said, hey, we've heard about these checkbook IRAs and we'd like to go buy this I think it was a mobile home RV park. I said, okay, so we had an elderly couple, husband, wife. So if you think of that joint ownership or the checkbook IRA when we're talking about bubbles in what that LLC contains, Brent's going to come up and talk in a little while. He's not an old guy. He might maybe got gray hair. Any hair is good hair, right? But you look at the situation. He's probably less concerned with making contributions, more concerned with getting stuff out. So in his situation, we're going to do a single LLC with both his account and his wife's account in it. All right? Because we're not concerned about getting more money into it. If somebody comes to me, and we had a young couple, Winco must treat people very well because I had two young checkers come in, and in their situation, they were mid-late 20s, and they had $150K apiece in their IRAs already with the matches and everything. Well, they wanted to be able to keep contributing money. We can't do a single checkbook IRA LLC for them, so we had to do one for each one of them so they could, you can always make the contribution to the custodial account, you just can't get it into that LLC. So, once in a while, Gary will structure something. If we know somebody's going to be making a large contribution in a very short period of time going forward, maybe they have to wait till some other asset liquidates so they can get money in. We'll have part of that membership interest attributable to a note, too, to allow them to get the funds in later.
Yeah, we basically make them run calculations on, like a hotel project, for example. They should have a budget and then just, have some cushion built in, and then we'll make the note, the delta basically in the note just in case, and then later if we need to change that, we can.
So this example, I love it because these people, older couple, they asked, hey, we've got IRAs, we want to go and buy this park. I said, okay, that's fine. Oh, did we mention, and so first thought was checkbook IRA. Did we mention we want to be the on-site managers to live there? No, you didn't mention that. No, you can't do that. So we had to shift gears entirely. And in this transaction, what we ended up doing is something called a rollover business startup. And I always jokingly say it's sort of an unfortunate acronym, a ROBS, but it is what it is, right? So we moved each of their IRAs into a new 401k plan, created a C corporation. The plan buys into corp. Gary would like to see them personally have an ownership interest in this as well. So now we've got that plan buys the corp. The corp bought the park. They were then employed as the on-site managers, taking compensation. They got an investment, they got a job, and they also got a place to live, all with this transaction. I think that's a pretty cool situation.
The corp owning real estate was a harder sell in the past, but now it's not so difficult.
The franchise world loves this. And the other thing, I would say, this was not, when we got in this business, it was a result of our clients, you people, with your clients wanting to buy more real estate. We had no intention of doing rollover business startups. But what happened after we got started? We had a crash. And what happened to people? They lost their jobs. The only money they had was a 401k plan. So we've actually used that structure from lots of real estate investment companies. People want to flip properties. This allows you to work on it. Otherwise, if you buy a property with one of these things, sweat equity, not okay. All right? You can't do that. So you can't work on it. And people say all the time, well, how do I get caught? Well, you get audited, and they go down the ledger for that account, and they say, oh, gee, $500 Sherwin-Williams, where's the labor? And your answer better be, well, my tenant did it or something. I don't know. But the bottom line is you can't work on this stuff. You can do the administrative functions of management, but beyond that, you shouldn't be doing any work on it, period. Don't do it. Okay, there was a situation where somebody had a business, they bought the property adjacent to the business, they were parking their equipment on that lot, they got audited, they got a problem. So we want to make sure you're careful. When we look at this thing, plan ahead, takes 2 to 4 weeks to get it together. You can buy virtually any property with a self-directed IRA or 401k, purchase with family members, friends, cannot purchase from or for them. You can't go buy Sonny a property at school to live in while they're there. Okay, that's a disqualified use. Can't do it. You cannot sell to you or any other disqualified party. You can use your IRA to buy property with a mortgage, to negotiate from the deal's inception the IRA LLC's name. I want to stress this. Your purchase sale agreements are signable. You can't tie it up with the person personally and assign it over to that retirement account. Once again, you've got a prohibited transaction. You took it off the market. The plan's got a benefit. So what's interesting is disqualified parties, you're looking at lineal ascendants, descendants, their spouses, or any legal entity owned in a controlling interest by one of those. Siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, fine. Why? I don't know, some senator, right? It's just the way it is. So
siblings always fight, so they
siblings always fight. But the deal is, you want to make sure you're ready to do this. If you scuba dive, the idea is you plan to dive the plan. You fly, you're a pilot, what are you going to do? You're going to figure that flight plan out, then you're going to go do it. You're a ship's captain, the same thing. This has got to be done sooner rather than later. Okay? You don't call up, find out what you can do, and then we hear from them. When do you think we hear from people? When they've talked to you and they need earnest money. That's not the time. Okay? Do not overextend. Plan on keeping nice cushion reserves, because if you don't have the money in there, the thing goes dark, you're limited by the amount of money you can make a contribution by. So be careful. Real estate, once again, is what? Real investment. Mr. Nelson. Wherever you'd like to be.
I'm going to fall asleep sitting.
Okay. And we do have I better take my watch and start a clock, huh?
Yeah. I've got 2 words for you, Bill. First one's short, the second one's a little shorter. Well. Okay, mine started rather innocuously. I had a job. Well, as soon as I got I came out of the Navy as an officer, active duty in Guantanamo Bay. Decided to get an MBA, and in the process, working with my father's firm, he was a commercial broker in Eugene. I was taking courses part of the time and doing appraisals and a bunch of other stuff part of the time. Great educational process. Upon the completion of that, I was hired by the state of Oregon to create 3 real estate courses: real estate finance, real estate law, and real estate principles, and to put those together as courses that were required before you would be able to sit for the real estate salesperson's exam. It was salesman back then, but now we've neutered it. And at that particular time, I also went around, stop it, this is bad. Okay. I also went around and established real estate programs in the various community colleges, and I was teaching at the University of Oregon at the same time. I was teaching 9 courses and so forth. Well, in the process, one thing I didn't really particularly recognize that there was a thing called OPERS, Oregon Public Retirement System, and part of my income was going into a deferred comp plan, et cetera. And I'd get a statement at the end of the period and so forth, and I'd look at it, okay, right, there's 18 bucks in there and so forth. Well, it continued to go like that for 37 years. And toward the end, it was like, well, it's all the way up to $256,000. Well, that's a big whoop. I hope I don't retire too quickly or consume that much of it too quickly. And then, interestingly enough, budget shortage caused the real estate program to be decommissioned, and at that point, I was retired. And as you retire, you were given access to that money. And you could either go on and, of course, receive a stipend the rest of your life, notice the term the rest of your life, or there was an opportunity to roll it out. And I was given a period of, I think, 9 days to figure out what I would like to do. And my wife and I decided that we should probably know a little bit more about this, so we attended a short course on what do you do with this thing. And one of the options was rolling out the funds. And I thought, you know, $256,000. I was a pretty decent card counter in blackjack, but I'd never made a bet of $256,000 that a bus wasn't going to run over me and kill me, at which point they get to keep the $255,980 that I had never received as part of the fund. It's only good for your life, okay? And then they said, okay, what do you like to do? I said, I'm going to roll it out. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it, but I'm going to roll the thing out. It was a deferred comp plan, and as long as I rolled the thing out into another deferred situation, I would have an opportunity to at least keep it there. And I had, the last 2 days, I was visiting OPERS in Portland. They said, what are you going to do with the other half? And I said, what other half? And they said, well, are you not familiar with this? I said, frankly, no, it's chump change. And they said, well, no, not really, because there's another half that the employer has dedicated. So now I was up to $500,000, and I thought, you know, I've never played a game of blackjack with a $500,000 bet. I said, I'm taking the whole thing out. And with 12 minutes left to go, they were able to complete that particular thing. I rolled it into a 401k plan that was by a national custodian. I was absolutely amazed at the sparkling return that I was getting, 3%. And about that time, I met a gentleman who had a superior product knowledge called David Moore. He says, what are you doing? And I said, I have no clue, but I've paid no attention to this so far. You know, it doubled overnight, so how could I possibly lose? So anyway, he says, well, why don't you put it into an IRA account, or simply roll the thing over to an IRA account, and find an IRA custodian that would allow self-direction, and you would be able to buy real estate and stuff like that. I said, well, I understand that part. So we flipped into Pensco, but unfortunately about the time that I decided that, you know, this I had placed into an apartment complex, which was then an 18-unit owned free and clear. I decided, well, why don't we just roll this thing out and convert it to a Roth? And if I were to do that, that would be a prohibited transaction. The equivalent there, or it triggers all of the tax. I would agree to pay tax on the value of this thing, but how would I do it? By refinancing the property, using the refinance proceeds, pay the income tax that would be owed on that particular thing. Now, all of the money is sitting in the same apartment complex, levered, yes, but also free and clear in 5.5 years at the rate that the cash flow is coming out. So all I was doing was deferring the cash flow for 5.5 years, and then from that point forward, churned it into whatever I would like to do, and all of the asset and the income would be free and clear of taxation. Made a whole lot of sense. The problem was Pensco. Can I say these? You're recording it, right, Joe? Yeah, shit.
Just say the trust company.
Yeah. The trust company sold to another trust company, and about the time that I had an appraisal set up, which I needed in order to do this conversion, they said, oh no, you can't do this. I said, no, I am going to do it. And they said, no, we won't allow it to be done. I said, well, I want to do this. I want to make this thing completely taxable and convert it to a Roth. They said, no, we aren't going to allow that to happen. And I kept saying, let me talk to your supervisor. But then my blood pressure would raise enough that it was not a wise idea. Well, by the time that I did get to a supervisor who said, oh, we see what you're trying to do, go ahead. Now, what I was trying to do was beat the Obamacare tax that was going to be tapped on the thing. It's what, 3.8%. And if you added 3.8% tax on whatever I was doing, it kicked it out to about 7.5 years or so for the property to pay itself back off again to free and clear. And I opted into thinking, you know, my lifeline, I'm not sure. But my wife is 23 years younger than I am, and when I go, she's going to need a lot of money for Cabana Boys and Harleys and so forth. So I had to be careful with what I was doing here, because it does pass upon my death. It does go to her as a beneficiary IRA, and is immune from creditor penetration. If she craps out, it goes to our son or whoever we direct it to. Now he has to be concerned from that point forward. Anyway, the long and the short of it, I'm still a traditional IRA or a basic IRA, which means that the income or the money that's sitting inside that fund becomes taxable as ordinary income to me when I receive it. As long as I don't receive it, it sits there and accumulates and does whatever. I made a huge mistake by not churning the portfolio and buying discounted paper and going out and motivating the guy to pay the thing off quickly and a bunch of other things that might have been able to be done. Of course, I wouldn't do it myself personally. I would have somebody else doing it. Otherwise, I might be called a dealer or something. Anyway, the long and the short of it, I own an 18-unit free and clear in the thing, and I also own a piece of a 75-unit apartment complex. The beauty of that one, a friend of mine that I bought a number of apartment complexes for was buying one. He says, you know, it's a Section 42, and it's right at the end of its 15-year period. We can buy the thing at a huge discount, but it's got an 8% interest rate loan on the thing. So it won't have much cash flow. I said, well, you know, I've got a couple $100,000 left in this account. I'm in for whatever I can do. So again, I'm not managing it. I'm not touching the money, and any cash flow just comes back to the IRA and so forth. Everything was fine, and then a couple of years ago, we hit the point where we could refinance it. It went from an 8% interest rate down to a 4 and I think it was a 3.78%, and all of a sudden, it's a cash cow. So basically, I took what I thought was $240,000, and I've got $2 million in my IRA account at this point. Big mistake, I didn't churn it. But again, there's a concern over dealer status. If I do churn too quickly, do I become disqualified by my activities and so forth? And I'm sure Anita is going to.
That's another conversation.
There you go.
Good job, Bob. Yeah, nicely done. So when you're looking at this stuff, you just sort of have to say, okay, am I conducting business or am I making an investment? So for example, we've got somebody that bought an apartment complex, had a laundromat in it. Well, the laundromat's part of the apartment complex investment. That's one thing. That guy loved the laundromat so well that he went out and bought a laundromat. Well, now what's he got? Now he's got a business. So once again, that guy's keeping his tax people busy in that situation. But that's not a reason to do or not to do something. If you want to flip properties on this stuff, just understand you're going to be subject to unrelated business taxable income. You factor that in the return. It doesn't mean you don't do it. Okay? So next I'd like to I'm going to go out of order a little bit here because we're going to finish up with the checkbook IRA. So Anita's going to come up and tell her story now. And she's got a solo 401k, which, you know, for a real estate broker, I love those things. Brent, sorry, I bounced you out of it. Okay? Sorry about that. I changed it on him.
Does this work? Okay, cool. So I'm going to give you the quick and fast abbreviated version of the 401k. Basically, the reason that I went with that style of retirement plan, my accountant and I sat down one time and had a talk, and he said, Nita, you're behind, like way behind. I go, I know. He goes, so you need to maximize your contributions. And the best way to do that is with a solo 401k. So your contribution is, there's a maximum contribution, which if you're age 50 and over, this year, the maximum contribution is $62,000. But the calculation is based on your adjusted gross revenue. And then because I am mature and over 50 now, I get to have a $6,000 catch-up fee. So that $62,000 is inclusive of the $6,000 catch-up fee or catch-up amount. So in my 401k, because I just kept stashing cash, I was too scared to play the Wall Street casino. I don't understand it. I don't like it. I tried to step in twice, and my philosophy was, as long as my principal is safe, all the gains and losses above the principal, great. But when you start diving down, you're going to take a bite out of my blood, sweat, and tears, I'm out. So I pulled my money out. So I've just sat on cash for a long time. Finally got enough critical mass, so I started doing some smaller deals when the market went down in the Great Recession. I bought a little tiny house for 50 grand. So the thing with the 401k, all of your repairs, everything, all that has to, your checks, it's a checkbook vehicle that I use, you have to pay the contractors, and it has to be, in mine, it's a AD Reesberg 401k plan, so all your checks have to be written that way. Anything that comes back in has to go directly back into the 401k plan. So I bought this little house, cleaned it up, and I sold it to a nice lady on contract. So she carried it, made payments into my plan for 5 years, and then she refinanced and paid me back. So I got profit and payments, and then I went back off to the races to find another deal. So that worked really well. I also did a hard money loan to some guys that were flipping, and I was 50% leveraged on their deal. So I felt pretty safe. It's like, if you guys fail, I'm going to foreclose, and then I'm going to take that property. So I got 9% interest on a hard money loan. This, again, was during the recession. The most recent deal I did is I bought a foreclosure on the courthouse steps in Polk County. You have to pay cash if you show up to these auctions. And I got into a little bidding war with one of the other guys, and my son was with me, and the guy looks at my son, because we were bidding back and forth, and he goes like this, and my son goes, "Hey, Mom, they're tapping out." I'm like, cool. So I got the house, paid cash. I had one tenant in there for a year. They just moved out. And then I was approached by a adult foster care provider, and he said, "I'd love that house, and it would be perfect for what we do." And it's in Monmouth, so it's close to campus. And he said, one of my residents works at Western Oregon University. And I said, so I need some references. So checked his references. His past landlord that was with him actually for 10 years. He said, "Oh my gosh, this guy's awesome. He does the yard work, takes care of the house, da 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 da." So I signed a 3-year lease with them. So he's in there for a nice amount every month, and all that money just goes right back into my 401k plan, and he takes care of everything. I've also invested at this point into 500 apartment units through some other syndicators that I've vetted that have a good reputation. They've got a track record. So by September, I'll have over 1,000 units, and I'm also a passive limited partner. The returns are very good. So some guys I know in Los Angeles and another guy out of Texas. So if you want more information about that, you can talk to me afterwards. Let's see, distributions, yes.
On the maintenance issue with the foster care, is he under contract with you to do all that work, and do you have to?
My attorney prepared a lease.
And so how does that fold back into your 401?
He pays me rent. I guess I'm not following you.
Are you paying him to maintain your facility at all?
Well, I pay taxes and I pay insurance, and that all comes out of my 401k. I write a check in the name of an AD Reesberg 401k plan to my insurance guy, and then also to Polk County for taxes. But he pays rent, and then the agreement in the lease is that he takes care of the yard. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I don't want to mow the lawn.
Yeah,
I'm not
I want
going
to
there.
stress. I want to stress that if you use a plan to buy something, you use an IRA to buy it, you're not the owner. That account is. So any income is the account's, and any expense is the account's. Period.
Yeah, it all has to be in the name of the plan. Everything.
The only way you're going to get a benefit is via distribution.
Yeah. And with this plan, I could take distribution starting at 49 and a half, which, whatever, that was a long time ago. But but I'm not doing anything until I'm 70, when I must start taking distributions. I think it's a great way to buy and sell real estate. There's no 1031 issue. There's no capital gains issue. It's nice just to see the monthly income come in someday, that might be a distribution for me. I will have to pay tax on it when I do make distributions.
We'll just start doing those membership interests and
Okay, we'll figure it
pieces
out.
of it, and we'll take
figure
care of it
out. I'll
that
get
way.
more gray hair, and we'll figure it out by
Less
then.
gray hair.
Yeah,
Once
maybe.
again, any hair is good hair, right? So-
Yeah. And also with a 401k, you can take a loan up to $50,000. I would recommend don't do that unless you absolutely have to, because you must pay it back, or you incur some penalties on taking the loan. And I think that's about it. So, on that little house.
Yeah, no, you've been on leverage.
It's kicking, because I paid cash and because of the current lease payment, it's like an 11% cash-on-cash return. So I'm happy with that.
And it's something you know.
And I can
invest in
drive
what
by,
you know.
I can look at it,
Yeah.
I can call the tenant.
Once again, what I want to stress with the 401k plans is even with the Roth IRA, you got leverage, you've got tax exposure. 401k plans, you don't. That's a big difference. You commit a prohibited transaction with 401k plan, only the money involved with the indiscretion. Checkbook IRA, you've got the opportunity to blow it up. You got to be careful. Got to make sure things are good.
And just two last comments. Michael Blanc is a syndicator, up and coming syndicator, and he has a pretty robust podcast. So if you listen to podcast 158, there's a guy in there that talks about QRPs, so qualified retirement plans. So that might be worth listening to. And then podcast 157 is our own Doug Marshall, who talks about making passive investments and how that has helped him in his retirement. So anyway, that's it.
We've got a few people in the room with self-directed accounts with different types of assets. Mr. McLean, now it's your turn. I screwed him up. I told him earlier he was going to go next, but I wanted to get Anita in there. So if I get your picture. Look at that, the Oregon Duck.
That's it. That's it. Season ticket holder for 41 years this year. So, my name is Brent McLean. I'm a CCIM, but I was a bricklayer. That's what I used to do in my other life. We started with a simple IRA, my wife and I did, contribution every year when it started, I believe, in 1978. Does that sound right? Was it earlier than that? But that's when we started our contribution. And each year, we put in the maximum contribution. And we did that up until, I think it was near when things started to crash in 2006. At that time, I'm going to use numbers. It was worth about $900,000. We had put that much money in with the stock market and the appreciation and everything we had that went into it. It's worth a lot. Well, guess what? We took a bath like everybody else. Our investment now is worth almost half. And that was a real painful thing to go through. So I had taken, like everybody in here, you sit in these IRA classes and you wonder, how do they really work and whatever. Well, I'd taken about 4 classes that David had done and finally said, I got to do something about this because I'm not going to put up with it any longer. So it took longer than 4 to 8 weeks, David. It took me longer to get.
is one thing, to do it is another.
Well, and there's the truth to that, but the problem was we had 6 different funds that we had fed. So I had this fear factor of how are we going to get all those funds over here? How confusing is this whole thing going to be? So we set up, after meeting with David, we decided a checkbook IRA would be the best fit for me and my wife for what we wanted to invest in. So we set up McGolden Years LLC. We put all 6 accounts into that fund, which we took the money. First thing we bought, we called David up and said, David, I've got to close my mother's estate. Got a note for less than $50,000. I want to buy my brother's out so I can get this closed. And if I remember right, the LLC could buy the note. And that's what we did. Yeah, from my brothers.
Not from mom, but from brothers.
Yeah, from the brothers. So we bought the note up. That has an 8.25% return on investment. Then one of my other clients that I've been working with for years is in industrial. He's a landlord that I represent on a number of units that he has. his family's liquidating a mini storage facility. And I'm thinking, boy, that'd be a good fit, but boy, look at the management. I can't have all that management. I can't be involved in it. I don't know if I can be hands off. Well, after talking to him and his family, we finally came up with, I'll buy a 50% interest. We'll take two of his siblings out, and then we'll set up this LLC. So we got together with my attorney to get the LLC set up for the mini storage facility. And then David set up our McGolden years, and I would highly recommend you do not have anyone but David. Gary set up this LLC because my attorney is a very knowledgeable guy. He would not touch setting up that LLC with a 10-foot pole. So the property's currently managed by my partner inside his office. We touch nothing. We get none of the money. We get a statement from him as it progresses. We are reinvesting in updates right now. So all the money that we're making from this mini storage is going back into, we had one building that was all 5x5 units that you couldn't lease out. We remodeled it, turned them into 10x20s. They leased out immediately. We're running, as best as I can tell, right at about a 12% return. I estimate that the portion that we bought into for $400,000 for the mini storage has almost doubled in value. There's quite an increase in value from when we bought in. We bought in I think it was 2012, and just before things started to make a turn the other direction. I think it's a fabulous way to go. It's really a fun way to do it. I was so upset the initial meeting I had with my stockbroker that finally turned me into setting up a self-directed IRA was in the recession. After I've lost all this money, he looks at me and says, you know, you're killing them. You did this Bank of America trade, and that really brought you up out of the hole. And it was a dumb thing. Nelson still thinks I'm pretty dumb for doing it, but made a good chunk of dough off of that and got some of the money back that we had lost. But the fact is, these IRAs are fun to do for yourself and you're in control of it. That stockbroker told me I was netting a 10.1% return. But when I did the math, I'm just an old bricklayer. When I did the math, I was only getting a 6.7% return. And that's when I decided it's time for me to control my retirement, not somebody else. And I love the way he does business. I think we all do, so thank you.
So I want to stress a couple things. This is not all or nothing, okay? Any financial advisor is going to tell you you should diversify, and I'm just suggesting maybe you diversify into some other stuff that you know. And it's not all or nothing. If we're talking IRAs, I would encourage you to leave what you want to keep in Wall Street with your financial advisor. Keep it separated from what you're doing in the self-directed world because it's a protection mechanism. You don't want everything. It's an easier play to shove it all into checkbook IRA, for example, and open up a Wall Street account in the LLC's name, an EIN. But the problem with that is it's still going to be encumbered if you commit a prohibited transaction on the self-directed component. If it's a 401k plan, fine. Everything can be in that plan. Take care of it that way. But really look at your world. Understand what's possible. The rules haven't changed. This stuff is something you can do. Why not invest in what you know? Take as much risk out of it as possible. And I always like to say the only dumb questions are the one you don't ask. We are right here at the bumper time-wise. Do we have time for a couple questions from the floor, Mark? Just take a couple questions from the floor if we've got them. Otherwise, we'll get out of the way and call it quits. Any questions? Yes. Well, I mean, there's companies that do strictly valuations for that, but it's a great question. So if we're talking about pre-RMD, pre-required minimum distribution, they just require a professional opinion of value. So I'll put this out to you guys as brokers. It's a great reason to maintain contact with your clients. They need a professional opinion value annually. So your interaction with a checkbook IRA is reduced to annual valuations of all cash and assets the LLC has. Or if you've got a self-directed or a 401k plan, you need a professional opinion value. When you get the RMD point, or if we're taking a full, what's interesting, if you take a piece of something as a distribution, they don't require an appraisal to be done. If you're taking the entire asset out, yes. Gary, you have any comments on that, annual valuations? Bob, do you? Well, we talked a little bit. So Bob just wanted me to mention, so that in-kind situation, we talked about that perfect, in-game, taking those in-kind distributions with the discounting. Your tax people, they do it with other assets, gifting all the time. If you gift your kid something, you're stuck with that 15 per person per year. You gift them a piece of a property, you can, bump that up substantially. We're looking at that same structure when we're doing in-kind distributions. So you can apply those discounts and really accelerate distributions while minimizing the tax consequence. Up to 40%. He wants to know how much discount. Talk to your tax and legal people about it. They can work with you on it. But yes, it's up to that. Yes.
You have to buy a property with the LLC that you create, right? You decide a couple years, for whatever reason, you got to sell the property itself. You sell it. You don't have to exchange. You can.
Well, if you're talking an IRA that's leveraged, I mean, people don't understand this. If you buy a property with a Roth IRA and it's got leverage on it, upon a sale, this is what I laugh about. People in the IRA world say, well, you don't even have to do an exchange. No, you have to. I mean, are you going to pay the tax? So income or gain attributable to leverage with IRAs, you've got tax exposure on. With 401k plans, you do not. And so one comment for you brokers, you're just going to list the property. If it's a checkbook IRA, the agreement's between you and the LLC. And the other comment that Brent made, if you've got income properties, when do you get the call the pipe broke? Christmas Eve, right? Okay. And if you've got a basic account, you've got to get somebody to pay that person. Your tenant probably doesn't want to do it. The plumber wants to get paid. Checkbook IRA allows you to write the check to pay that plumber. A solo 401k, as Anita said, you've got the power of the pen. You're just going to write that check to pay the plumber. Anything else? Yeah, definitely. You got to make sure, if you go out and get a loan, just so you know what these loans look like, you're going to look at 65% at most loan to value. They typically are going to want to see 15% reserves. They don't want you to, and they want to do a deal with somebody that's got some background in investment real estate. They're probably not going to make a non-recourse IRA compliant loan to somebody that's never had income properties. Yes. Dale. Yes. Typically, you're talking a couple points. Mr. Marshall, I don't know if you got, is he still here? He took off. Oh, yeah, right here. He doesn't know. But so the question is non-recourse money more expensive? Yes. It's a couple points more. It's just going to be. And once again, it's not a reason to do or not to do something. It's just another component you've got to factor into what's going on. Mr. Burdick. Yep. Either as common members of an LLC or Tennessee in common. Common members of the LLC is easy to have everything go in and out. But upon a sale, what's going to happen to the personal interest? So we might have, instead, we'd probably have a Tennessee in common. I don't know, Gary, we do it both ways. It's really a question of personal preference, what you want to do. But the Tennessee in common structure is going to allow you to do an exchange upon disposition. The qualified money just goes back in, goes forward.
I mean, the LLC has in this case, you'd be the manager, so you'd write the checks. LLC owns property, so it'd be, and then if you want to get out at the end and you don't recognize, you can always, the exchanger stays in the LLC, the IRA gets out, it's ticked out, and then you don't have a drop and swap issue. So there's usually a way to get around stuff if you plan it.
So if it's Tennessee in common, you're right. I mean, if you've got a $100 invoice for something, it would be pro rata your ownership. Brent?
I wanted to add one more thing, the non-recourse financing. I went to Siuslaw Bank, turned into Banner Bank. Banner Bank, the banker that I had, I said, do you have any non-recourse money? Well, oh no, absolutely not. Well, what if it's my IRA and I want to get it?
I wouldn't want to see a transaction where you're getting a loan because they can get you, if you're a co-owner of the asset via LLC or tenancy in common, if they're getting a loan because they can get their fangs into you, there's clearly a benefit to a disqualified party in that situation. So I would be very careful with that. The other thing we've had problems with over the years is just the, bad boy carve-outs. Right, and you just got to be careful, and you got to understand what you're signing, and the bottom line is there's not supposed to be a benefit to a disqualified party. Period. So we're out of time. I want to be respectful of all you guys. I'm going to give the mic back to Mark, and then we'll be around if you've got further questions. Thank you very much for your time today. I hope you found it helpful.